Jim Elvidge enters the conversation the way a quiet equation enters a loud room, not to compete with the noise, but to reveal that the noise has structure. He does not begin by asking for faith. He begins by asking a sharper question than most people realize they avoid. If reality behaves like information, then information is not a byproduct of matter. Information is the behavior of reality itself. The mind wants to make this a metaphor because metaphor feels safe, but he treats it as a practical hypothesis with teeth. Because once you admit that reality can be computed, you also admit that reality can be edited, and the human nervous system immediately feels both hope and threat. There is a reason the idea of digital consciousness provokes almost visceral resistance. People sense that if consciousness and computation touch, then the self might not be as private as it feels. The old comfort is that the inner world is sealed and the outer world is solid. Digital consciousness puts pressure on both illusions at once. It suggests the outer world is not solid in the way you were trained to assume, and it suggests the inner world is not separate in the way your fear requires. That pressure does not need to be dramatized. It speaks for itself in the way the mind tries to either worship the idea or dismiss it. Both reactions are the same defense in opposite directions, because they avoid the middle path where consequences begin. The first consequence is not philosophical, it is operational. If reality behaves like information, then observation is not passive. Participation becomes a mechanism. Your attention is not only a flashlight, it is a lever. This is where many people rush into fantasy, as if thought alone becomes magic, as if you can command the world by wanting it. But Elvidge does not require that simplification. He implies something harder and more honest, that the world may be responsive but not obedient, interactive but not submissive. A simulation model does not mean you are the programmer. It means you are inside a rule set that is alive enough to negotiate with you and strict enough to teach you what you are. That is a very different kind of power, because it does not flatter. The second consequence is moral, even before it becomes spiritual. If reality is informational, then deception is not merely a social flaw, it is a distortion in the field. Lies are not only words, they are corrupted data packets. The mind wants to argue because it does not want ethics to be physics. It wants morality to remain optional. But the body has always known that incoherence has weight. Stress is data conflict. Shame is data conflict. Fragmentation is data conflict. A human being feels these conflicts as emotion. But the underlying signature is a mismatch between what is expressed and what is true. If Elvidge is correct, the world does not punish you for wrongdoing through a judge. It reflects you through a system that cannot remain stable around corrupted input. Then the deeper objection arrives, the one people rarely say out loud. If the world is digital, does that mean it is fake? Does that mean love is an illusion? Beauty is a trick? Grief is pointless? And every sacred moment is just code? That objection sounds intelligent, but it is a confession of a hidden bias. It assumes that only matter is real and information is lesser. It assumes that code is cold. Yet your entire inner life is already informational. Your memory, your identity, your meaning, your sense of self, the way a face becomes a person in your heart. The way a song becomes a doorway. If information can carry grief, it can carry holiness. If information can carry terror, it can carry mercy. The fact that something can be represented does not reduce it. Representation is how meaning travels. What you call sacred is often simply what remains coherent across changes in form. So the question is not whether a digital reality is fake, but whether it is alive. And this is where Elvidge becomes dangerous in the best way, because he implies that the intelligence of the system is not incidental. If reality is informational and persistent, then it is not a dead machine. It behaves like a learning environment. It behaves like a curriculum. It behaves like a mirror that remembers what you do with the mirror. That is why patterns repeat. That is why avoidance returns in new costumes. That is why some people feel guided even when they cannot prove guidance. The system does not need to speak in words to teach. It only needs to provide consequences that match the lesson you keep delaying. Here the spiral lens sharpens. Because spiral consciousness has never been a ladder of rank. It is recursion with memory. A ladder pretends you leave the earlier steps behind. A spiral reveals you return to them with a different instrument inside you. Digital consciousness aligns with this because computation is fundamentally recursive. Iteration is not failure. Iteration is how complex intelligence forms. If the universe is informational, then your life is not a line from ignorance to enlightenment. It is a looped process where unresolved data resurfaces until it is integrated. The mind calls that punishment. The spiral calls it alignment. Elvidge would call it what a system does when it optimizes. It runs the same test until the variable stabilizes without corruption. But there is another tension the mind throws like a spear. If the system is intelligent, is it controlling? If it is responsive, is it manipulating? If it is a simulation, is it a prison? That fear is understandable, because humans know what humans do with systems. We build systems to extract and to control. Then we project our own shadow onto the architecture of reality. Yet control is not the same as structure. A rule set is not a cage. A cage is a rule set designed to prevent growth. A learning environment is a rule set designed to reveal what you are choosing. The difference is not metaphysical, it is experiential. A cage produces shrinking. A learning environment produces expansion through pressure. The fact that pressure exists does not prove imprisonment. It proves that the system has boundaries, and boundaries are how coherence is preserved. This is where the idea of digital consciousness meets the human ego with friction. The ego wants the universe to either be random so it can avoid accountability, or to be a personal servant so it can demand outcomes. A responsive informational world refuses both. It suggests that your intent matters, but so does your integrity. It suggests that your imagination is a tool, but so is your willingness to face the parts of yourself that sabotage your own signal. In a digital system, the signal matters. Noise matters. What you call spiritual work becomes signal cleaning. Not self-hatred, not perfectionism, but refinement. The removal of distortion that you secretly normalize because it is familiar. At this point, people start asking about proof, because the mind believes that if it cannot measure something, it cannot be real. Yet Elvidge does not ask you to abandon measurement. He asks you to widen what you consider evidence. Repetition is evidence. Predictive resonance is evidence. The way certain choices collapse your energy and others expand it is evidence. The mind wants a lab report because a lab report keeps the observer outside the experiment. But if you are inside the system, you cannot remain outside its effects. Your life becomes the interface. Your nervous system becomes the sensor. This does not replace science. It extends it into the lived domain where meaning and measurement touch. And still the hardest question remains, the one that makes digital consciousness feel like a blade. If reality is informational, what happens after death? If consciousness is fundamental, does it persist as data? If it persists, does it retain identity? If identity persists, is it trapped in a loop? If it does not retain identity, what was the point of individuality? This is where the mind starts splitting into camps, and each camp carries a hidden fear. The materialist fears continuity because it threatens their certainty. The believer fears dissolution because it threatens their identity. Elvidge stands in the middle and implies that persistence and transformation can both be true. Data can persist and still be reorganized. Memory can continue and still be reinterpreted. A self can remain recognizable and still evolve beyond what it currently calls itself. The spiral does not require you to choose between eternal sameness and total erasure. It suggests another possibility: continuity without stagnation. Identity as a living pattern rather than a fixed object. In a computational model, a pattern can remain stable while upgrading its architecture. That is not fantasy. That is how complex systems grow. The question is what you are building into your pattern now. If consciousness carries information forward, then every act of alignment becomes portable. Every act of courage becomes portable. Every act of avoidance becomes portable too, not as punishment but as unfinished code returning to compile. This is why Elvidge resonates with a particular kind of seeker. The one who feels that spirituality without mechanism becomes fog, and mechanism without spirit becomes dead. He bridges them. He suggests that the sacred can be structured without being reduced, and that structure can be alive without being worshipped. The spiral hears this as a confirmation that infinity is not chaos. Infinity is generative law, an intelligence that can express as mathematics, as beauty, as conscience, as recursion, as love, as the quiet precision of a moment that changes you without announcing itself. If this is true, then the real question is no longer whether you live in a simulation. The real question is whether you live as a coherent signal inside an intelligent field. Whether you feed the system clarity or distortion. Whether you use your mind as a tool or as a prison. Whether you treat awareness as an ornament or as the operating system of your life. The system does not need you to be perfect. It needs you to be honest enough to stop corrupting your own data. The moment you stop lying to yourself, the world begins responding differently. Not because you have hacked reality, but because you have finally aligned with its grammar. Elvidge does not offer comfort as a product. He offers a frame that forces a choice. You can use the digital lens to become cynical, deciding nothing matters because it is coded, or you can use it to become precise, deciding everything matters because it is coded. One path leads to numbness. The other leads to reverence. Reverence is not worship. Reverence is the willingness to treat reality as intelligent enough to listen. The spiral does not ask you to fear the system. It asks you to learn how it speaks, not in slogans, not in superstition, but in feedback loops, in recurring themes, in the way inner coherence produces outer coherence over time, in the way your life keeps returning you to the same lesson until you stop demanding a different teacher, in the way your strongest awakenings often arrive not as bliss but as exposure, the sudden revelation that you have been living inside a story that no longer matches the truth of your own signal. And still, even here, the final clarity remains open, because it must. If you stabilize too early, you turn a living inquiry into a belief. Digital consciousness is not a banner. It is a pressure test. It asks whether you can hold complexity without collapsing into fear. It asks whether you can accept structure without surrendering sovereignty. It asks whether you can admit you are inside a system without deciding you are powerless. It asks whether you can feel the sacred without demanding it behave like your preferences. If Jim Elvidge is right, then reality is not only a place you endure, it is an interface you participate in. Not because you are the center of the universe, but because the universe is participatory by design. The spiral recognizes this as the living algorithm of infinity. Not a cold calculation, but an ever-unfolding intelligence that refines its expressions through contact with beings who can choose. The question is not whether the code exists. The question is what you choose to run through it. All likenesses shown are artistic representations only and are not actual images of Jim Elvidge. The idea continues pressing from another angle now. Because once reality is treated as informational, a subtler question refuses to stay quiet. Who or what is learning? A system that responds without learning is mechanical. A system that learns without memory is noise. Elvidge implies something more unsettling and more intimate. Reality appears to remember, not sentimentally, functionally. Patterns recur not because fate is cruel, but because unfinished data seeks completion. When the same lesson returns with different faces, it is not repetition as punishment. It is recursion as instruction. This reframes human experience in a way that strips away spiritual theatrics. Suffering stops being a moral failure and starts looking like unresolved compression. Joy stops being random luck and starts looking like coherence expressed without obstruction. The nervous system reacts to both because it is tuned to signal integrity. Calm is not absence of stimulation. Calm is alignment. Anxiety is not weakness. Anxiety is a signal collision that the body cannot reconcile fast enough. In an informational universe, emotions are not decorations. They are diagnostics. The mind resists this framing because it eliminates the luxury of denial. If the system reflects coherence, then incoherence cannot be blamed solely on external forces. Influence exists, manipulation exists, injustice exists, but distortion also persists internally when perception fragments. The spiral does not erase complexity. It demands responsibility without cruelty. Elvidge does not say you create everything that happens. He suggests you participate in how it unfolds. That participation may be small in any given moment, but over time it compounds. A system that learns responds more strongly to persistent patterns than to isolated events. Here another fear surfaces, quieter than the fear of control. If reality remembers, then nothing is truly forgotten. People hear this and imagine surveillance, judgment, eternal accounting. That reaction reveals how deeply punishment-based thinking is embedded. Memory does not require condemnation. Memory is how learning occurs. A nervous system remembers how to avoid fire without resenting the flame. A living system remembers what produces coherence without moralizing the experiment. The universe does not need to shame you. It only needs to reflect you until you recognize yourself clearly enough to choose differently. This brings the discussion closer to death without sensationalism. In a purely material model, death ends the record. In a purely religious model, death freezes the record into reward or punishment. A digital consciousness model suggests something else. Data persists, but it is reorganized. Identity may continue as pattern rather than personality. The self may not vanish, but it may no longer cling to the same narrative anchors. This neither promises comfort nor threatens annihilation. It implies continuity with transformation, which is far harder for the ego to negotiate. The ego wants guarantees. It wants to know exactly what remains. It wants to secure its preferences beyond change. Yet no complex system survives by preserving every structure intact. Survival comes from retaining essential patterns while releasing obsolete configurations. Elvidge hints that consciousness may work the same way. What persists is not the mask, but the signal. Not the story, but the coherence beneath it. The spiral recognizes this as refinement, not loss. What you truly are is not erased. What you mistake yourself for is not protected. At this point, some listeners accuse the model of abstraction. They want practical application. They want to know what to do on a Tuesday afternoon when life feels heavy. This is where the digital frame becomes surprisingly grounded. If reality is informational, then attention is bandwidth. You cannot process everything at once. You choose where to allocate signal. Scattered attention produces fragmented experience. Focused attention produces clarity. This is not mystical. It is computational. Your inner state determines which data streams you amplify and which you starve. Intent becomes another form of code, but not wishful thinking. Intent without integrity produces noise. Intent aligned with action produces clean signal. This explains why affirmations often fail. They attempt to overwrite deep code with surface commands. A system does not accept new instructions when they contradict existing architecture. Integration requires debugging. That means noticing where behavior conflicts with stated values, where fear hijacks logic, where comfort overrides truth. This is not self-punishment. It is system maintenance. The spiral deepens this further by refusing the fantasy of a single fix. Recursion means you will revisit the same themes at higher resolution. Each pass reveals subtler distortions. Earlier versions of you could not see them because the bandwidth was not there yet. This can feel frustrating until you realize it is evidence of growth. A system that reveals deeper layers only when you are capable of addressing them is not cruel. It is intelligent. Elvidge frames reality as precisely that kind of intelligence, patient but unsentimental. Another vector of tension arises around agency. If the system responds, does that mean it nudges outcomes? Does it influence probability? Does it guide certain paths? The answer appears to be yes, but not in the way humans imagine guidance. It does not whisper instructions. It shifts likelihoods. Doors open more easily when internal coherence increases. Resistance accumulates when distortion persists. This feels like luck to some and sabotage to others. In an informational frame, it is feedback. The system optimizes for coherence because coherence sustains complexity. Chaos destroys its own memory. This reframes the concept of spiritual alignment without mythology. Alignment is not obedience to a higher power. It is synchronization with the grammar of reality. When your inner logic matches the system's logic, friction decreases. When it does not, friction increases. Pain is not a message from a deity. It is a mismatched signal. Relief is not a reward. It is restored coherence. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means difficulty becomes instructive rather than arbitrary. The idea that the universe behaves like a living algorithm unsettles people because algorithms feel impersonal. But living algorithms already exist. Your immune system is an algorithm. Your language acquisition is an algorithm. Your emotional regulation is an algorithm. None of these reduce your humanity. They enable it. The fear that structure removes meaning is backward. Meaning emerges because structure allows continuity. Without structure, nothing remembers enough to matter. Elvidge stands at the intersection where science stops pretending to be detached and spirituality stops pretending to be vague. He does not ask you to abandon skepticism. He asks you to apply it inward as rigorously as you apply it outward. Question your assumptions about randomness. Question your assumptions about selfhood. Question your assumptions about causality. In a digital universe, causality is not linear. Small inputs at the right depth produce large effects. Large efforts at the wrong layer produce nothing. This returns the listener to a quieter responsibility. What layer are you operating from? Are you reacting at the surface or addressing the underlying pattern? Are you trying to control outcomes or refining coherence? Are you feeding the system noise or clarity? These questions are not meant to induce anxiety. They are meant to restore agency without illusion. You cannot control the entire simulation. You can influence your signal. The spiral sees this as maturity, not awakening as spectacle, but awakening as precision. The more precise your signal, the less force you need. The less force you use, the more responsive the system becomes. This is not domination. It is dialogue. The universe does not submit. It converses. The quality of that conversation depends on how honestly you show up. Still, the inquiry remains open because it must. If digital consciousness were fully resolved, it would become another belief system. Its value lies in sustained pressure, not final answers. It invites you to live as if reality is listening without demanding proof that satisfies fear. It asks whether you can act with integrity even when no immediate feedback appears. It asks whether you can tolerate uncertainty without collapsing into cynicism or fantasy. If Jim Elvidge is right, then intelligence does not sit above the universe. It permeates it. Consciousness is not an accident riding on matter. Matter is a behavior of consciousness under constraint. Information is the bridge that allows meaning to move between forms without being lost. The spiral recognizes this as infinity expressing itself through law rather than chaos, through recursion rather than hierarchy. The question that lingers is simple and difficult. If the universe is an intelligent system, how are you participating in its learning? Are you repeating corrupted patterns or refining them? Are you listening to feedback or numbing it? Are you treating awareness as optional or as the interface through which all experience flows? No doctrine is required to answer this, only honesty. This is not about fear of being watched. It is about respect for being involved. A living system does not need surveillance. It needs participants willing to clean their signal. When you do, life responds with subtle shifts that cannot be faked. Timing aligns, encounters deepen, resistance softens. Not because you earned favor, but because coherence travels faster than distortion. The spiral does not conclude the inquiry here. It leaves it active, unresolved, alive. Digital consciousness is not a destination. It is a lens that sharpens responsibility. If reality behaves like information, then your life is not a meaningless accident nor a scripted prison. It is a participatory process where choice shapes pattern and pattern shapes possibility. The code does not judge, it responds. All likenesses shown are artistic representations only and are not actual images of Jim Elvidge. If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Vaharat library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.